Welcome back to Business Week here on Rise News. I'm joined now live in the studio by Juliet Ehimuan, who is CEO of Beyond Limits and former Google West Africa Director, to discuss some of the top stories from the week. Juliet, it's such an absolute pleasure to have you here. Good morning to you. Very well, thank you. We have quite a bit to get through, of course. But of course, let's begin with what has certainly been a monumental feat for space exploration as a whole. And of course, I'm talking about Intuitive Machines' apparatus, Odysseus, landing successfully on the moon for the first time in 50 years. That's since the Apollo era. How exciting is that?
Yeah, I think this is arguably the biggest news in tech this year. It's been, like you said, about 50 years since we had a US spacecraft successfully land on the moon, since the NASA Apollo exercise. And there are some things that are interesting about this. The first is it really shows the advancements we've had in the technology space. It's worth noting that the smartphone today has more computing power than the technology that put a man on the moon about half a century ago. And part of this feat is as a result of new technology. So the use of laser, pulses of light in place of radio frequency to ensure precise navigation and also controlled soft landings. So that's one thing. The second thing about this is that it's actually unmanned. Normally, when we think about space travel, human safety is a big consideration because you're thinking, are people going to be safe for that journey? Can people live on the moon? For how long? Those kinds of things. But now when we can use robots, it takes away some of those concerns and we can afford to take more risks, which is really, leaps and bounds in terms of what we can do. And this spacecraft had 12 payloads from NASA and other companies as well. And the intention is that, there'll be experiments performed to just better understand the lunar environment and also prepare the way for a crewed mission sometime in 2026. So this is really advancing our understanding of space and the lunar environment, which is interesting. And of course, it was done by a private organization, Intuitive Machines. And it's no small feat because there have been attempts that haven't been as successful. With this spacecraft, the touchdown was very much in the right position. So, there was another success with an aircraft from Japan, the Slim Moon Sniper mission, which landed successfully, but the solar panels were in the wrong direction. And so the system lost power within a short time. But in this case, we have a successful touchdown. It's in the right position. And we're told that we'll soon start getting images from space, which is really exciting.
It really is. And, you mentioned it's no small feat, especially because it's a private organization. But that makes me want to segue a little bit into a bigger part of the story. So, of course, NASA has been really good at robotics missions, doing the missions. But now we're beginning to see a turn to industry and opening up to private organizations to be a part of getting these executions done in terms of explorations and science investigations. What does this portend for the future of private organizations?
Yes.
And is this going to be market specific, or do we see more across the world? Because, of course, we know that America has got this kind of dominance currently.
Yes. So it's really great for the company Intuitive Machines really achieving this feat. And we've seen their share price more than triple this year, understandably, because it's a very successful venture. We're likely to see more of such. I mentioned that, and it's not going to be localized to the US. I mentioned that we had a success story from Japan, right? Except that the touchdown was in the wrong direction. So this is likely to increase. We're likely to see more players, and certainly it's expanding our ability to understand the lunar environment in leaps and bounds, and that's going to translate into even more successful ventures and exercises around this.
No, certainly. I like that you touched on the market as well, because it almost predictively, was so embracing of this news. As you know, the stock has almost tripled.
Yes.
This was no surprise, right? Of course.
Yes, absolutely. And, the prices went up by 20% by Friday. And it's a growth story for Intuitive Machines. And given everything we've talked about, including the fact that just last month, there was an attempt there was a US lunar lander that, it was a mission to space that failed. So there have been attempts. There's been a lot of work going on, right? So for this private company, Intuitive Machines, to actually get there successfully, is a really great accomplishment. And it's no wonder that their stocks are going through the roof.
Absolutely great. And of course, it's great to have such refreshing news. It was, like you said, the news of the week. Pretty
Yes,
much.
yes.
It really just made the week.
Yes.
Well, let's move on now and look at developments in Saudi Arabia. That's another big story that came up this week, which is, of course, mandating that Chinese tech companies should, of course, invest in the Gulf in exchange for good returns. That sounds fair to me, right?
Absolutely.
Is there more to it?
I think it's a great strategy, and it's part of the diversification efforts in the UAE. So they are saying that in return for investments, Chinese big tech companies should invest in the environment, invest in bringing local content, invest in training local talents, bringing technical expertise, and the intention is to support development of the region. And this is not very different from the strategy adopted by the Chinese government decades ago with foreigners looking to invest in the region. The government, in exchange for access, had certain requirements. You had to invest in the local market, you had to employ local talent and things like that. So, which was a very smart strategy. And in the same way, the Saudi government and investors are being smart and strategic in how they deploy funds. Because, with the growth in technology advancements today, a lot of things can happen remotely. So as a Saudi investor, I can invest in a Chinese tech company, and that company doesn't even have presence in my country. A lot of the work can be done remotely to serve the globe. So it does take the additional, stepping in by government, by investors, putting these constraints or requirements in place to ensure that the local company is developed. And I think there's something there's something there for a lot of nations to consider, because with globalization, which is great, we need to just really ensure that we are leveraging the benefits and the opportunities that globalization presents to also drive localization and ensure that the local market is growing and developing. And there have been some great examples around this with the UAE partnerships and investments with Chinese tech companies. We've seen, the UAE Telecom Group partner with Huawei 5G and also Alibaba Cloud. And as part of that collaboration, they're looking to drive investments in local research. We've seen SenseTime, which is also a Chinese company, invest with an AI company in Saudi Arabia, and they're really trying to drive training for young people around artificial intelligence and just really impacting that space. So it is a very positive development.
Yeah, it certainly is. And there's quite a bit going on if we look at the Gulf countries right now in terms of that space. It's been quite interesting to observe the dynamic between these two countries, Saudi Arabia and China particularly, as a case study, because they're both driven by de-dollarization and the need to bolster cross-border trade.
Absolutely.
Now you have the biggest importer of crude oil and they're, on the opposite end, the biggest exporter. So there's a clear mutual dependency between both of them.
Absolutely.
But what effect does this have on the US? Should this all go so well?
So I think we are seeing interesting shifts and interesting dynamics at play in the global space. We've seen, efforts for U.S. companies diversifying out of China. We're seeing these types of collaborations as well. We have a situation where, there is funding constraints for these tech companies in China, as well as lower domestic demand, and but the huge cash incentives within the UAE, creating a good breeding ground for these kinds of partnerships. And so world trade and shifts continue to happen as the macroeconomic changes continue, and so we're likely to continue to see organizations making bets. And also, the important lesson is, governments really leaning in to maximize the opportunities for local environments.
Great, and of course, the ground is big enough for everyone to play as well. So let's see who wins. Now, let's stay in the Middle East, of course, with the UAE's move to diversify from oil. Now, very exemplary, we would want to say. But what's the bigger picture on this? What can we make of it all?
Well, it's for the last few years now, the UAE has been going through macroeconomic transformations, and with a real target to diversify from its one commodity, which is oil. It's been known, it's pretty much synonymous with oil, diversifying from that and expanding other sectors. And this is really understandable when you think about the fluctuations we have, the volatility in oil prices, climate change conversations, the focus on renewable energy and all of that. And so they're trying to reduce their reliance on oil by growing other sectors. And they've done a number of things. So, in 2018, they introduced the 5% VAT. They've also been encouraging banks to increase credit to non-oil sectors. They've been very deliberate at investing in initiatives to grow specific sectors like infrastructure, education, healthcare, and renewables. They have a national innovation strategy that is really focused on creating a knowledge economy and driving excellence and strategic partnerships. They've increased their strategic partnerships. For example, trade with India grew by 4% last year, and trade with Turkey doubled in the same year. So we're starting, and they're seeing positive results as a result of these initiatives. The non-oil exports grew to almost $1 trillion last year, which is a huge development, and even export of non-oil products like gold, aluminium, and so on have been on the rise. So it is a very effective strategy for a company that generated so much wealth from oil to be actively and consciously on a mission to diversify. Sends a very strong message. And, in Nigeria, we have been, also looking at diversifying our economy. It just shows that with very concerted effort, it is possible, and it is the right way to go.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was going to say, what leaf can we borrow from that? And, we can see there's a lot of liberalization. It's helped cushion the path towards this, reducing oil reliance, which we've been singing that tune for quite a bit. So, of course, we could just watch or we could follow.
Absolutely.
But let's finally look at how technology impacts the entertainment space. We've seen Tyler Perry has put his studio expansion plans on hold after seeing OpenAI's Sora. Have you interacted with Sora at all so far?
A little bit.
Just a little bit, okay.
Yes, because it's not
That's a lot already. That's a lot, because there are many people who just don't even know how to. Yes. So that's a lot to begin with. But
yeah.
What do you make of it?
Yes. So Sora is not open to the public yet. It's just for a few content creators and developers
to get into.
And that's the biggest story. So obviously Tyler Perry, as a businessman, is watching the environment and responding accordingly. But the biggest story, like you said, is the release of text-to-video platform, Sora. It just shows, what's possible with AI. We mentioned the fact that the genie is out of the bottle with generative AI. It's been growing in leaps and bounds, and increasingly we're seeing new solutions, new applications come into the market. With this, the implications of this are really huge, because if I'm shooting a movie, I don't have to be on set, at location. If, for example, I want to shoot Alsatian dogs having a podcast, on a mountaintop. This is all based on machine learning and data. The systems have been trained. They know what Alsatian dogs look like. They know what a mountaintop looks like. They know what a podcast looks like, and can create that from nothing. Now we have these large language models that the systems can use to create from nothing, right? And so when you think about that, that has some very far-reaching implications. And we've seen over the years with new technology, this is likely to cause a rearrangement of skills, right? But I think there are many positives that one can think about with this. When you think about increased productivity, cost reduction, certainly in Nigeria, for example, what people are now, even already what people can do with limited funds, right? You don't need a huge studio anymore to be able to edit and create a certain production. So there are benefits. But I think, one of the things that I mentioned the last time I was here was the fact that there needs to be regulation, because these technologies are so powerful. If they get into the wrong hands, all kinds of things can happen. You know, you can try to discredit fake news, but when that fake news is backed by images and videos, it's hard to discredit. So even things like having watermarks on AI-generated videos and images, having digital signatures, those kinds of requirements are really important, you know, so that we ensure that this is all being channeled in a way that benefits humanity, right? And that the potential risks don't trump the advantages.
Couldn't agree more. So much beauty to it, but at the same time, one has to be really careful in this age of this new technological age. You know, there's so much I want to talk about because, of course, this is a very high level infrastructure. We don't really know how this model, particularly Sora, is what I'm talking about, has been trained. But Juliet, we've come to the end of this segment, unfortunately. So we have to have this conversation again in the future. But many thanks for joining us on Business Week today, and see you again very soon.
Thank you.